Hey, Mike here, producer behind ZERMELO, and in this video, I'm going to show you my default bass rack. I load it on every session, just lets me come up with bass lines really quickly, lay down some ideas, and there's a couple unique features about the bass rack that I think are going to be really helpful when I show them to you. All right, so if you're interested in learning more about bass or drums or groove in general, check out my Secrets of the Groove course. I've got a button below this video that will link you there, or consider becoming a member of the ZERMELO Inner Circle, which is where you'll get access to all my production mixing courses, including Secrets of the Groove, plus unlimited feedback on your music. So check that out. There's buttons below this video. After the video, let's go ahead and play the video right now. So let's get started with the bass patch, and I'm going to show you the bass patch, my default bass rack, in an actual session. Okay. And then I'll open up a new session just to show you that I load it on default every time. But the idea is that having a default kind of bass rack, or just opening a project with one that just kind of sounds good off the bat, makes it really easy to just write a bass line. I mean, it's almost like, finding just a decent patch in like your favorite synth, whether that's Serum or Massive, and just having that loaded in a template ready to go, so that you could just come in and just start writing some bass lines if you want to. All right, and so now this one already has some effects on it, but I just wanted to kind of show you what's going on. And here we have the bass patch. It starts with just a simple saw wave. So right here, the saw D in operator, and that's the basis of the patch. The next most important thing here within operator, because I obviously use operator, is the kind of output configuration, also kind of the FM configuration. What do they call it? The algorithm. Okay, but anyway, so basically, the way that this works is when you have it like this, which is I think the default, you have it so that the output, I believe, of these, I guess you can call them oscillators. It depends, because if you're doing FM synthesis, I think they're called carriers or modulators. But the whole point is that this guy, D, will modulate C, C will modulate B, B will modulate A. But if you change the configuration to where they're all horizontal, then each of these become their own oscillator with an direct to the output. So D goes straight to the output. C goes straight to the output. So it's kind of like having a synth where you have like 4 oscillators. Okay, and so let's now walk through these. So the first one, the most important one for me, is the saw D. Okay, it's just a saw wave, right? Now the next one up here is just a lower harmonic. But if you look, you can see the course is set to 0.5. Now, so what that means is that this is an octave below the saw. Now, the reason why I have it set up like this is because if I have a saw playing, let's say, maybe a C bass line. So a C, if I was going to play this first oscillator here, it would be around 65 hertz, okay? Unless I was playing a super low C, which I probably wouldn't. That's going to be like 32 hertz or something like that. But if I just go get a spectrum analyzer and I play a C, okay, so this one's, okay, let me come over here and just have the A oscillator on, okay? So that's your saw wave, right? And so you can see it's playing right here around 65 hertz, okay? All right. Now, a C at 65 hertz, that doesn't really have as much weight as I would want it to. And so that's why I've added in the option of having a sub below that. And you can see it's just a sine wave, okay? And anyway, yeah, it's just a sine wave. And so when I add that one in, you can hear it down there. Now you're hearing the effects of the saturation down the line, but so if I turn this off, so standard saw wave, I turn B on, it's going to add in that lower harmonic down here. Now, the reason why I like this, and I'm actually going to turn off, I guess, the saturation and the R bass, and I'll turn off this guy too. Although it sounds kind of cool. I can leave that on because it's not doing anything with the lows. Okay, so if I turn B off here, again, just your standard saw wave. If I turn B on, which is the sub oscillator, an octave below the first one, you can see we're just bringing in that lower sub. Now, the great thing is that I can control the level of that sine wave, that sub, independently, okay? And so that's what I'll do is I'll just change the level here, all right? Next up, we have the third harmonic, okay? Now, why do I have the third harmonic here? And that's because if you actually look at this configuration, check this out, okay? So here we have a low C, here we have a C right here, 65 hertz, and then since it's a saw wave, okay, so if I turn off B and play the A oscillator again, this is a saw wave, and a saw wave, the first two harmonics are the original kind of pitch, so C, octave up, then we have the fifth, which would be a G, and then we have a C again. So if I look at these harmonics, you can see down in the bottom left of the spectrum analyzer, 65 hertz, which is a C, and then we have 131-ish, which is another C, and then we have G, and then we have C. Okay, so those are the first four harmonics of any saw wave. If I play a G, it's going to be G, G, D, G, because those are the first four harmonics of the G harmonic series. Okay, G, G, D, G. So here we have G, G, D, G, okay? Now, if we go back to C, then we add in the lower octave, okay? What we're missing here is there's this big gap between this 65 and then 130, okay? One of the great growly parts of a bass happens right around 100 hertz, right around 100 hertz. And so what I want is I need to get an oscillator in there at 100 hertz. Okay, well, how do I do that? Okay, and so this is the fun thing. Okay, so here we have let's just turn off A, and we're looking at B now, just B. So literally just a sine wave. Okay, but think about this. Okay, so we have the sine wave, which is C. Okay, so it goes C, C, G, C. Okay, so with 32 hertz C, okay, what's the next C? 65 hertz, right? Watch. So that's the next C, 65 hertz. Okay, but remember, we want something at 100 hertz. Well, what's the next harmonic when we start down here at 32? Okay, so it'd be C, C, G. So what is G? What frequency is G? In this series. Okay, so right there. So it's 97 hertz, literally 100. Okay, so that's an example of using literally, figuratively. But anyway, so there you go. Okay, so if I'm playing this low C, okay, and I add in the third harmonic above this low C, that's going to give me a frequency around 100 hertz. Okay, and so that's exactly what's going on here. You can see the quartz is set to 0.5, so we're an octave below the first oscillator. And so, but then what I've done is I've drawn in the third harmonic. So if I turn this off and I turn in the first harmonic is the low one. Okay, if I draw in the second harmonic, that's going to be what? That's going to be an octave up C. See, there you go. Okay, 65 hertz. If I turn this off and I draw up the third harmonic, what's that going to be? Of course, that's going to be G, around 100 hertz. And so that's why I have this harmonic here, is because I can add it in if I need to fill in that frequency range around 100 hertz. Okay, so if we just start from the bottom, and that's the whole thing. So nothing's actually going on with D. The only oscillators I use in this kind of default bass rack is the first one, the second one, and third one. So A, B, C. A is just your basic saw wave. Okay, now again, if I need to, I can add in that lower sub. So here's B. Okay, and if I need to get that extra harmonic in there, we're getting some saturation artifacts. Let's see. Let's turn some of this off. So that's a little bit more pure, okay? All right. So if I now turn on C, okay, watch. We're going to get a little harmonic around here around 100 hertz. See that right there? Now I can turn it way up. Turn it off. Turn it on. See how that one harmonic just adds an insane amount of growl and beef? And so that's why I have it there. Okay, and I hope that the reasoning behind this made sense. Obviously, this relies on an understanding of the harmonics, the harmonic distribution. There is a video inside of the Secrets of the Groove course that is actually taken from my start to finish POSA course, where I do a deep breakdown of bass harmonics. But I think what we've covered in this video should be enough. I mean, the most important, the key piece of information is understanding the harmonic series of a saw wave and the first four harmonics. The first four harmonics are going to be, for example, if we're doing a C, it's going to be C, C, G, C. So it's 1, 1, 5, 1. Okay, and that's going to be true for any saw wave in any key. It's just going to be 1, 1, 5, 1, based on whatever pitch you're playing. And then, so that's the first oscillator. And then if I want to, I can add in that lower sub. So if I'm playing something like a C, or if I'm playing something like a B, even if I'm playing something, so if I played a G, what would that lower one be? That would be too low, wouldn't it? Hold on a sec. Okay, that's way too low. Yeah, 25 hertz. So if I'm playing a bass line in G, I don't need that lower harmonic, so I don't need to turn it on. Okay, that's the thing, is this default bass rack just gives me the options. Number one, of adding weight in the sub. So if I'm playing something like C or D or E, those bass lines, I can do that. Now, what I can also do, so for example, if I'm playing E, okay, I can turn this lower one off, and I can just play an octave down. Okay. And so that might sound good, but that was going to be a different sound. Okay, listen to that compared to this. Watch. Okay, it's just a different sound. The reason why I like having this third harmonic, or playing the E a little bit higher with the saw wave here, and then having that sub oscillator and then adding in the third, the reason why I like that configuration is because you get this cluster of harmonics around at 100 hertz, and that's what makes something sound really growly. Okay, but that's pretty much the basic operator patch that I use. Other than that, you can see that I have the frequency and and a bunch of things mapped over here. So I have the amp decay. So if we come over to the amplitude envelope right here, you can see I have the decay mapped to number 1, and that's going to be true of all 3 of the oscillators. Okay, I have the sustain mapped, so you can see the sustain right there on the amplitude envelope mapped for all 3. The same with the release. The filter, obviously the filter cutoff is now mapped over here. The resonance is mapped just below the filter cutoff. And over here, we have some of the filter envelope settings. So if we come over to the filter envelope, you can see there we go. Okay, I wasn't selecting the filter envelope. There we go. So with the filter, you can see that we have the decay mapped, we have the sustain mapped, and we have the envelope amount mapped. And those are really the 8 parameters that I need to mess with when I'm messing around with the bass. And so they're all mapped perfectly there. Ableton 11 lets you map even more parameters, so 16, but I'm still here on Ableton 10. I'll eventually switch over, but I just don't want to have to set up all this stuff. Anyway, moving on. So this is my default bass rack, and so that's the walkthrough of understanding the 3 oscillators, what they're doing, making sure that we have the right output configuration, and then the pitch here is nice because if I just come right up to my keyboard and I start playing, and that's not in the right thing, I could just hit shift down, and that will start to move the pitch here in octaves, and that will let me quickly find the right place to be. So I don't have to go in and change the MIDI notes, or I don't have to change anything on the keyboard. I guess I could press octave up or down here. But another thing that's helpful with the pitch is, let's say I'm working in the track. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to write like a lead part. So here, for example, like this. Now, one of the most important things when you're writing like a chord pattern or a lead part is that it obviously needs to gel with the rhythm of the bass, but sometimes the bass might be a little bit hard to hear. So sometimes what I'll do when I'm writing another part in the track is I'll leap the bass up an octave just so I can hear it a little bit better. And if I can get the lead part to work with that higher bass, then obviously it's going to work with the lower bass. But it just makes it really glaring and obvious that I have to deal with the rhythm of the bass and the way that the bass line is written when I leap up an octave when I'm writing another part. Okay, that's something I'll also do when I'm working with the vocals. If I'm coming up with the bass line, I'll write the bass line in a higher octave, because then I can really see if they work or not, because it's so obnoxious when it's in a higher octave. If it's obnoxious in a higher octave but it works, then it'll definitely work down below. But it just makes it a little bit easier to hear. But that's why I have the pitch there. It just makes it easy to move things around. Other things that are on the default bass rack, kickstart in the beginning. The reason why I put kickstart in the beginning, you might think that's ridiculous or weird, but it's because kickstart and LFO tool don't really do well with delay compensation. So if you're using plugins that have a lot of latency, which sometimes I'll do, these plugins don't. So the saturator's only got 4 samples of latency. Let's see, something like erosion. Yeah, erosion has 5 milliseconds of latency, 240 samples. And that's going to cause the waveform to get pushed over in kickstart in the LFO tool. And so there's ways around it that you can change where the LFO tool is actually, what's it called, ducking within the waveform into an extremely detailed degree. But that's a pain, okay? Plus, it doesn't matter, okay? If I put kickstart here at 100%, where it's taken out the bass, then the bass is going to be gone there. It doesn't matter if I put as much limiting or compression as I want to drive up the bass, it's still going to be ducked underneath the kick a little bit. Of course, this stuff might get brought up if I'm using limiting or compression or saturation to push it up. But then what I could always do is I could just use another kickstart or LFO tool or sidechain compression down the line, okay? But I like having kickstart just right at the beginning. Sometimes I'll use the LFO tool. Sometimes I'll use just a regular sidechain compression. But if I'm using kickstart or LFO tool, I'll usually have one at the beginning, and if later on, if I need to put one down the line, I will, okay, because of compression, saturation, limiting, that kind of stuff. R-bass, always a staple on my bass rack. I don't always use it, but it's there. If I need to turn it on, honestly, I used to get crazy, and I would move this around and try to find the perfect target frequency within R-bass, but these days, I pretty much just leave it right at 80, okay? And I turn it on. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I just turn it off. Saturator, this is really cool. What I'll do is I'll have the hard curve on. This is kind of the default. And then I'll just mix the dry wet in. And this is going to do 2 things. Number 1 is going to introduce a little bit more harmonics. Number 2, it's going to increase the volume. If you look at the graph here, you'll see all this is a map of the input on the horizontal axis to the output on the vertical axis. And you can see even for small input values, you're getting a large output. Okay, and this is why saturation is called nonlinear processing, because there's not a linear kind of input to output ratio, you could say. Okay, um, it's nonlinear. Okay, so even small input values have a large output, and that's ultimately what generates the harmonics. That nonlinear kind of relationship here generates the harmonics. But what I'm saying, number one, you get those harmonics. Number two, you're automatically going to make the sound louder, because even by introducing this, you're introducing that aggressive kind of dynamics curve, and you're going to push those lower level signals up. Again, because those lower level signals, they're low in volume on the input, but saturation is going to push them up higher on the output. So immediately you're going to start to turn your sound into a sausage when you run it through something like a saturator. So even low values of this are going to grit the bass up. And they're also going to make it a little bit fatter, a little bit more of like a sausage. Okay. EQ, this isn't standard. This is just as needed basis, but R bass, saturation, always there. LFO tool here, really just to monitor the waveform, just to see what it kind of looks like. And that's usually pretty much what I'll have. Is just a simple operator. Okay, get that, get the balance of the oscillators right, get the right kind of pluck or whatever on the filter, and then the sidechain, of course, R bass for some grit, some beefiness, and saturator again for some grit, some beefiness, some fatness. Okay, and so I just want to show you a real example of my default bass rack being used in action, because I use it in almost all my tracks now. And it sounds pretty, I mean, it seems to really work. I mean, I'm not changing it. And it makes it very quick and easy, and that makes me very happy. One thing I want to do is just open up a new set, and just to show you what on the default load, what that looks like. And you'll see it's pretty much the same thing. Obviously, this one's tweaked because it's in an actual track, and I have to kind of tweak things around, add a little bit of processing to make it work. But here, this is my template. And I wouldn't even call this a template. All it is I have Loop Cloud ready to go. I have Splice ready to go. I have a little piano that's ready to go so I can start coming up with melodies right away. And I have a bass that's ready to go so I can start coming up with bass lines right away. And then I have an audio channel for a reference track if I'm using it. Okay, but the point here is looking at the bass channel. And here it is. Okay, so this is the default bass rack. As you can see, I have the bass here. I have the saturator here, LFO tool for sidechain. Now this is after, because again, these guys don't actually have a lot of latency. R bass is 0, saturator's 4. If I want to, I can move this beforehand, but again, these two plugins right here don't add a lot of latency, so I'm fine putting the LFO tool there. This utility is interesting because what this does is it flips the polarity of the bass. Okay, and so it actually would make maybe more sense to put it over here. But when you flip the polarity of the bass, you're just flipping the waveform over. And what that does is it could just change the bass sound. And so I just literally turn this on and off to see if I like the sound of the bass flipped. Okay, and yeah, that's really it. Okay, and then again, sidechain. This I already have the default actual real sidechain compression ready to go if I need to use that. I have a low pass filter if I need to automate this during breaks or whenever during drops, and a limiter just to catch peaks at the end. LFO tool to monitor the waveform, same with spectrum analyzer just to monitor it. But right out of the gate, it sounds like this. And that's it, okay? And so again, that's just gonna be the saw wave. Okay, if I add in that lower harmonic, let's open up the spectrum analyzer. So there we go, we're getting the lower harmonic there. Let's get that third harmonic, so you're gonna see a little guy right here. There you go, to get that beef, let's add that a little bit higher. Okay, super beefy now. Let's add R bass. Sounds pretty good. All right, let's add the saturator, see what happens there. Starting to sound pretty beefy, and looks like that's all we're doing. Okay, other than that, I would just start getting like an EQ, but actually, hold on. Let's flip the polarity, see what that sounds like. And you know what? Let's get the LFO tool open just so I can show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is with the polarity normal. For some reason, it's not playing through this. Why is that? Okay, well, we're not going to mess around with that too much. Let's just go ahead and open up this LFO tool here. Turn the depth down. Okay, I have no idea why the LFO tool isn't registering. This is bizarre. Let's go ahead and get the LFO tool. Drop another one. Okay, what the heck? Let's go over to the master channel. Okay, I have no idea what's going on. That's really weird. Okay, but unfortunately that's not working. Let's just turn on the utility plugin. Can you hear it's a little bit different, right? It's a little bit more of a bam, 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 bam. Okay. And so that's what I just really wanted to show you. It's just that you get a different sound actually if you flip the polarity of the bass. And that's coming from the difference that you get from the harmonics, the R bass even. So when on the filter, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll change one of these filters from clean to a different one. And then I'll use the filter drive to increase the volume of the bass rather than just clean gain. And so all these kind of saturation distortion might change the positive values versus the negative values of the waveform or the bass line. And so if you flip it, you're going to get a slightly different sound. And that's the whole point behind the utility plugin here with the polarity turned on. Let's try duplicating the bass channel really quick. And you know what? Maybe it's not playing because we need to get like a little bass or like the MIDI. So let's just play a little beat here. And what we'll do is write a little bass line. Okay. Okay. So 126. Okay. And then a little bass line. So I'm trying to write the original bass line from that beat. Bum 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 bum. So let's see. What is this note here? Okay. Let's come up to bum bum bum. Let's just play an F. Bum bum bum. Okay, something like that. Okay, let's see. Let's turn on the sidechain here. There we go. So now the LFO tool is working because we just needed to, I guess it doesn't work if it's just playing on input. That's weird. I've used this for years and I never even knew that. But here's the bass line. See this? Okay, so look at this. So you can see the positive values of this waveform are different than the negative values of the waveform. And so that means if you flip the polarity on it, then it's going to sound different. And it's going to look different. Okay, watch. It's going to look different. So you see these lower spikes down here? Those are going to flick up to the top. And these kind of more shallower spikes here, they're going to flip to the bottom. do it again. See how it flipped it? Anyway, that's what I mean. Okay, so these kind of positive values now on this end are different than the negative values. And so when you flip that, you're going to get a different bass sound. And so that's why I have the utility plug in there. But that's my default bass rack. I'm going to make this available to you. I'm going to take the R bass and the saturator and stuff off and just give you the operator. So that will be a download below in the Secrets of the Groove course. But if you have any questions about this, let me know. I think it was pretty technical in the beginning talking about the oscillators. It's a lot of ground to kind of cover, but I just wanted to do a little bit of an overview video. And if you have any questions, of course, I can make update videos that go deeper and maybe break it down into even more bite-sized pieces. All right, I hope that helped. By now, you've got a couple ideas on how to add texture, grit, character to your bass line. Again, if you're interested in learning more about bass, drums, groove, check out my Secrets of the Groove course, link below this video, or consider becoming a member of the ZERMELO Inner Circle. You get all the production, mixing courses, and unlimited feedback on your music. So check that out, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.